Welcome to Shadow of Truth, and your hosts are Dave Pranzler from InvestmentResearchDynamics.com and Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org, and today is Wednesday, June 28th, 2017. Dave, what's going on?
Another day, another market intervention by the central banks.
Imagine that.
All of that effort they're doing to intervene in the markets, and they still can't keep the price of gold down. They've tried already several times this morning.
Well, it just proves how crazy they are and how rigged everything is. Just everything. So,
well, what's on your mind today?
Everything is on my mind. No, I've got a lot going. I've got a lot on my mind, so let's just jump in and make it happen.
Sounds good.
One of them is, Janet Yellen came out yesterday and made that statement about there will be no financial crisis in our lifetime, which to me says better get your preps in order. Because if you remember, Beranke, he did the same thing before the 2008 crash. He came out and said, no housing problem. There is no housing problem. And what happened 18 months or so later? Tanks are going to be in the street if you don't give us the ransom.
Yeah, right? I tweeted exactly that. Well, not exactly that. In response to the comment Yellen had made, we won't see a financial crisis with the banks in our lifetime. And you're right. It did bring to mind when Beranke said in 2007 that there was no housing bubble and the mortgage market was fine. And it was actually maybe less than a year later when we basically had a de facto systemic collapse.
Yep.
So, these Fed heads, I think Greenspan was probably the last one who was allowed to do any kind of thinking for himself. I really think these people who are on the FOMC committee are given a script to read, and that's what they stick to, because they say the same thing every time.
Yep, sure do.
And it's, when you hear that, you only know a bubble after it's happened, after it's popped, and that's a bunch of BS.
It sure is.
I mean, the current stock market and the current housing market is more overvalued than just about the housing market's more overvalued than at any time in history, especially in relationship to the median income of the average American household.
Yep.
And stocks, if you could adjust the accounting so that it was apples to apples, I'm fairly confident that the PE ratio on stocks would be almost as high, if not as high as it was in 1999. So, we're in a massive asset bubble, and it was a result of all the central bank printing, not just the Fed globally, and also the massive credit expansion. American household debt is at an all-time high now.
Yep. And I also wanted to comment, just either late yesterday or this morning, China said that they were going to move into the blockchain, which supports my thesis that the current parade of cryptocurrencies are laying the groundwork for the banksters. And I want to come back to that in just a second, but I want to touch on the Deadstream media finally being caught red-handed yesterday by James O'Keefe regarding the Russian narrative, and that just completely blowing up in their face. And if you've noticed, the other Deadstream media outlets haven't said a word about it. And I heard somebody comment yesterday that they're not going to, simply because they don't want to wind up in the crosshairs, or they may be coming next. So they're just moot on the whole point.
You're talking about that interview with the CNN producer who said he knew that the Russian story was fake?
Yep. If you've not listened to that, oh my God, it's unbelievable what this guy said. Seriously. It's ridiculous.
Well, I haven't listened to it. I knew from the beginning that the Russian news was fake. It was Hillary Clinton who planted the seed for that in one of the debates, and no one's ever come up with proof. At the very least, you would think if they wanted to to demonstrate Russia was meddling, then you would think the NSA would have leaked out some of the evidence they would have, because if anyone in the world has it, the NSA does.
Exactly.
They record everything on the internet.
Everything, including this
and
conversation.
No one's been able to produce evidence.
Yep.
And, it's probably true that Russia tries to do some influencing over here. We do the same thing to every other country in the world. In fact, if we have the ability and we don't like who's running that country, we go in there and overthrow it.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That's what they're trying to do in Syria, and Russia said no.
Right. And the cryptocurrencies, I sent the expose, if you will, that I created over the weekend, where I took a fairly deep dive into what's going on with the cryptocurrencies in relation to the banksters, what's happened really going back to 1999. And when William Buter wrote Willem Buter wrote an article laying out how the banks must move to a cashless society in order to implement negative interest rates. And if they don't, then they can't. Then they can't do it because it won't work. And that was in 1999. Now you fast forward and we hear all this talk about, then we have Cyprus that happened. We have everything that's happened since, and all the groundwork being laid for a cashless society. And it's all out there. Most of the pieces are now in place, including the retirement funds, the pension funds, everything imploding to force people to keep their accounts in the bank. So if they keep them in the bank, then they can do with them whatever they wish. So I personally believe that the cryptocurrencies that are out there today are doing nothing more than laying the groundwork for the banksters to push us into a cashless society, period.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. I'm surprised a lot of the guys who write about this don't reference it, but when Bitcoin first made its big splash on the scene, there was a symposium held on Bitcoin by a couple government agencies. And at the time, it was being commented, and I agree with the comment, that the fact that the government was not rejecting these cryptocurrencies as being anti-dollar, but were in a way embracing them by holding symposiums on them, kind of told you that, the government had something else in mind with these things. And I think that's ultimately what's going on.
I agree wholeheartedly. Anytime, when you've got the IMF, the United Nations, governments at every level, moving into this space and looking at this space and writing papers on what's happening, that should be a huge red flag. The IMF and the United Nations, come on. These are the very criminals that we report on every single day.
Yeah, I think these cryptos are a way for them to implement, try and move forward their one world, one government agenda.
Yep. What's on your mind, Dave?
Well, you pretty much summarized it all. I was kind of stunned when Janet Yellen made that comment about we'll never see a banking crisis in our lifetime. That's absurd.
It is absurd. Like I said, if your preps aren't in order, they better be. You need to be getting everything straight, because something nasty is on the horizon.
I guess the one thing that is still bothering me was this call that Andrew Maguire made, that gold's going to go crazy to the upside in 26 days, and that date from the interview is July 5th.
Right.
And I just have a feeling he's gonna have a lot of egg on his face, because it's apparent to me from just watching the tape day in and day out that the central banks are in there right now working overtime to try and prevent gold from rising. So
yes,
if there's something that's going to occur that's going to trigger that rise, great. I just don't see it right now.
Uncalled for smash a couple of days ago. I mean, that was really incredible. I mean, to see that line straight down in both gold and silver. I mean, silver attempted to recover a little bit better than gold did, but
well, it was at one of the slowest periods of the trading day. It was after Shanghai had closed. It's 30 minutes after China closed for the day. The entire Muslim world was out of the market that day, so there was like less than half of the physical demand that you would have in the overnight trading session. And there's no news triggers, and all of a sudden, as soon as London gets going, boom, straight down. I mean, it's pretty obvious. They don't even try to hide it now. I think
exactly.
I think hits like that are intended to be shock and awe to scare people from investing in gold. But I mean, the bottom line is, on a year-to-date basis, the price of gold has the same rate of return as the S&P and the Dow. And it has a higher rate of return than the New York Stock Exchange Index. That's year-to-date basis. Most people probably find that surprising, because when I ran the numbers yesterday, I was a little bit surprised.
Yeah, and you can't see it. You can't see. That's what I like about gold and silver. I can go to my local coin dealer. I can go to the flea market and visit with 4 or 5 different coin dealers. I can acquire whatever it is that I want, and that transaction is 100% opaque, period. Nobody knows that it happened at all, except for me and that dealer, and that's it. Cryptocurrencies, not so much. That's well known. Can you get to it? I don't know. I don't know enough about them. But I know that they're out on the internet, and I know that the internet is extremely vulnerable to whatever. I mean, and part of my argument in this report that I just created was asking who has control of the absolute root element of the internet, and that would be the government. The Department of Defense developed the internet. What's the Department of Defense's job? Death, destruction, and control. So who's to say that there's not a root element within the architecture of the internet that allows them backdoor access to everything? Why would the BRICS nations a few years ago be looking at developing a completely separate internet system? I mean, these are serious questions, and they're within the realm of reality, in my opinion.
I agree. And at the end of the day, each separate cryptocurrency can be limited in the amount that's created, but an unlimited number of different cryptocurrencies can be created. So in a sense, it's really not any different than a fiat currency.
Right.
Instead of turning on the printing press, just create your own blockchain.
Right. Exactly. Well, I still like gold, still like silver, both in physical form. They're completely 100% opaque, and that's it. So you can't get any more secure than that, in my opinion.
I'll second that.
Well, where would you go? Where should we go from here, Dave?
Get ready for a long holiday weekend.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds like you got to go spray some weeds.
Yeah, I got to go spray some weeds. That's my afternoon excitement. Oh, well, I guess we'll pick it up in a few days, Dave, and see where we stand.
I think we'll pick it up next week.
Well, all right.
Have a good long holiday weekend.
You too, Dave.